Have you ever wondered what happens when the laws of different countries get into a fight with each other? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating legal puzzle that does just that. It's a concept called renvoi. And yep, that's French. It literally means to send back. And trust me, it's the legal system's very strange answer to some truly mind-bending international problem.
All right, to really get our heads around this, let's just jump straight into a hypothetical. This is where you can see just how tangled things can get when life crosses borders. So, picture this. An American citizen who retired to Italy passes away. Now, they left behind a house, but the house is in France. So you've got 3 different countries involved. The person's will might be perfectly fine under American law, but what do Italian inheritance rules say? And what about French property law? Which country's rules get the final say here? This is exactly the kind of thing that gives international lawyers a massive headache. Yeah, this isn't just a tricky thought experiment. It actually has a formal name, a conflict of laws problem. And in our super globalized world, this happens all the time. Every country has its own rulebook, and those rulebooks, well, they don't always play nice together. So how on earth do courts untangle a mess like this? Well, for these really messy situations, courts have a special tool they can pull out, a legal idea whose name kind of gives the whole game away.
And that tool is renvoi. So at its core, it's the process where a court, let's say a court in France, looks at a case and says, okay, our rules tell us we should be using Italian law for this. But, and this is the important part, the story doesn't stop there. You see, the word renvoi is French for send back or referral. And that one simple idea is the key to this whole thing. Think of it like a game of legal hot potato. The case gets passed to another country's legal system. So you might be asking, why bother with all this complexity? Well, the main idea is to get a consistent outcome. The result of a case shouldn't totally change just because you filed it in Paris instead of Rome, right? It's also designed to prevent something called forum shopping, which is basically when lawyers try to pick a specific court just because its laws are more likely to give their client a win. So, what does this whole sending back thing actually look like when it happens? It's not a one-size-fits-all rule. It actually comes in 2 main flavors. On one hand, you have partial renvoi. That's a simple 2-step. The case gets sent to country B, and country B's rules immediately send it right back to country A. Easy enough. But then you have total renvoi, which is more like a chain reaction. The case could get sent to a second country, which then might pass it to a third country. As you can imagine, it can get complicated fast. Okay, the best way to really get this is to look at a real-life example. The theory can be a little tricky, but seeing it in action makes it all click. Let's check out one of the most famous cases in this whole area of law. This is the famous Forgo case. So you had a Bavarian citizen who died in France. First, the French court looked at its own rules and said, okay, we should apply the law of the person's nationality. So off to Bavarian law they went. But then, when they looked at Bavarian law, it said, nope, you should apply the law of the place where the person lived, which was France. So the case got sent back. The French court accepted the referral and just applied its own French law. Problem solved. Now, total renvoi just adds more potential players to this game. Imagine if in that Forgo case, Bavarian law had pointed not back to France, but, say, to Swiss law. The French court would then have to go look at Swiss law to see where it points. That's the kind of chain reaction total renvoi can kick off. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. You might think this is the standard solution everywhere, but it turns out not every country has agreed to play this legal game of pass the parcel. A bunch of countries, including the United States, just reject the whole idea. They argue for a much simpler approach. They say, look, if our rules point to a foreign law, we applied that country's internal law, and that's it. We're not going to get into their send-back rules. They basically choose simplicity and getting a final answer over the potential chaos of renvoi. It just goes to show you how divided the legal world is on this. This whole thing seems incredibly complicated, doesn't it? So that brings us to the big question. Is renvoi actually worth all the trouble? Let's weigh the arguments. So on the pro side, it really is all about fairness and consistency. Supporters argued that renvoi helps make sure you get the same result no matter where a case is heard, which, as we said, stops lawyers from gaming the system. And it can also make sure the law that's finally applied actually has a genuine connection to the case. But the downsides, they're pretty significant. For one, it's really complex, which means it's slow and it is expensive. Courts have to hire experts just to figure out what another country's conflict of law rules even are.
And sometimes it can lead to a weird outcome that the people involved never, ever would have expected.
So, what's the big takeaway here? Renvoi is basically the law's very intricate and, yeah, sometimes pretty clumsy attempts to create some kind of order out of the legal chaos of our modern world. It's a complex tool that was designed for a reality where people and property and problems are constantly crossing borders. And that kind of leaves us with a final, much bigger question to think about. As our world gets even more connected with digital nomads, global families, and international business just being the norm, is a complicated tool like Renvoyer really enough? Or is it maybe time to start thinking about a future with truly borderless laws? Something to ponder.